Here from allmusic.blogspot.com. Been kind of a not difficult week, but challenging week trying to do YouTube and do everything else, training and all this stuff. And I went to a movie. I went to the Elephant Six recording company documentary. I want to do a video about that, but I don't have time to do that and do some of this other stuff with the metal list. So I'm going to do the metal, progressive and extreme metal list. More of it. Don't like to have these videos go 50 minutes, but that's seems to be what happens. But anyway, so I left off with number 120, and I changed the format back to the long list again. Maybe this will help. So Andre Matos' album "Time to Be Free" from 2007. This is my favorite, and most people consider it's his debut solo album, his best solo album. He was doing the stuff with Shaman and Angra before that, and a Viper actually. But this is a fun record. I remember liking it a lot in 2007, although there were albums that came out that year that kind of took more time. I was into a lot of the progressive art rock stuff. But yeah, it's more refined. It's more compared to some of the records that came after it and the previous Reason. I have it a little higher than Reason. People say it's power metal. I guess you could say that it's a little more power metal based than some of his other records. But the title track, the 8.5 minute title track, is from memory is the one that was my go-to always back then. But I really miss Andre. And I should just do a whole video on his music because I said he's like one of my favorite, if not my favorite singers of all time. So number 120, "Time to Be Free" from 2007, Andre Matos. Number 19, the debut album. Many debut albums, of course. I have a kin to debut albums because the progressive art rock list had a lot of those too. A lot of previous ones. For the Imperium, who I think are from Finland. Anyway, the self-titled album. For the Imperium, I think are not active anymore. They put out 2 albums. You can see the artwork's a little bit what's the word? Punk? Not punk. I can't think of the term with punk. But anyway, it's like not cabaret, but I'm totally spacing on that term. Something like Amanda Palmer would probably appreciate. Very theatrical, that cabaret. Man, that's gonna bug me now. Steampunk. I guess you could steampunk's do with leather, but it's whatever, mannequins. There's a contrast. It's you see the theater with the curtains. And For the Imperium, they cross over genres. They are a metal band first and foremost. I'd call them. Yeah, they're hardcore points, but they're kind of they're in the kind of wacky avant-garde vein that Unexpect and Sicketh and even Diablo Swing Orchestra into a point, or more so maybe highly influenced by like Faith No More and Mr. Bungle, like humor metal, theatrical humor metal. California Girl, Born and Raised. That's like a dance you'd hear. That's like a song you'd hear a dancer doing like a pole dance or something like that. Working Class Heroine. There's all these like references from my memory to other songs and other artists. But it didn't lose its charm. I was surprised how much I liked this band after getting it. I think they're from Finland, but maybe... Yes, they're from Helsinki. Yep. And there's a catchiness and a poppiness to many of the songs, but also there's sort of a craziness to a lot of the songs. Dog Fashion Disco is the other band you might compare them to. But this came out in 2011, and I'll say this, while they do remind me of a lot of those bands, there's not a band that is exactly like them in terms of sort of like where they're going with a lot of their songs. They're kind of all over the map. They're not as crazy, maybe, as Unexpect, really. They're not quite as technical, but they're still technical enough. They're, I was thinking a little bit like Crotch Duster, where Crotch Duster goes 1 or 2 more steps, even though they're still in musicianship, into the humor and the absurd, kind of Zappa-esque. They're kind of slightly more refined version of Crotch Duster in a way. Which Crotch Duster, I absolutely adore that record from 2004. A lot of people do, even though it's sort of a parody, but it's also kind of a semi-serious parody, which is like a contradiction in terms. But anyway, Anyway, for the Imperium, I think they broke up, and they put up the Hail the Monsters record a few years later. But they're out. Their debut album from 2011, number 119. Number 118, Textures, the final album, the last album, likely final album from Textures. Textures, of course, probably best known as sort of the post-Meshuggah djent, incorporating djent into their, extreme metal sound, metalcore. This album, I think I did talk about drawing circles. I had drawn circles earlier. For whatever reason, this album is not appreciated as much as some of their others. But I actually felt like it was almost better in some ways. I felt like they refined their sound a little bit. Some of the playing's a little bit more sort of, it's refined. It's better. The compositions. The thing that's really sad about this is there was another part of this, Phenotype and something else. There was a second. This is the first of a 2-album project they did, and then they had to break up and they didn't get to release the second part. The more I listened to this, the more I enjoyed this record. I enjoyed the previous Textures, but I felt like they kind of reinvented themselves a little bit, and I felt like there was more, the production. Yeah, this album, this album was much higher rated. But yeah, I mean, if this would be my go-to, actually. I like Drawing Circles. They have another album from the late 2000s that was pretty good. They have 5 albums, but again, they broke up after this. Silhouette's the one that's considered the most rated or highest rated. It is the most rated, but I kind of slept through Silhouettes. I should go back to. I just remember when Phenotype came out. Dualism was the previous one. I enjoyed it a lot in 2016, and then I was just down when they broke up, and was down the fact that they had mentioned wanting to release the second part of this, but. What can you do? I'm happy we got it, and that being said, I think it's the highest Textures album I have on this list. So, anyway, number 118. Number 117, the last, hopefully not the final, because I know they've posted on they've done shows and stuff like that on social media, but from 2017, the most recent Sicketh record after their reunion, their hiatus and then reunion, or their comeback, The Future in Whose Eyes, which... This album is... I remember enjoying this when I haven't listened to it recently. I mean, I have it on vinyl. I loved Opus Cities, which, find out where that falls, where that goes later. But, I mean, it's kind of... In some ways, it wasn't, reinventing their sound. The only thing I remember about this is it sort of felt like it was, them with better production, basically. But the style... Yeah, some of the David Bowie reference... The style really isn't that dramatically different, but I mean, it was weird how it was just it came out, it was a big deal, and then kind of just forgot about it, unfortunately, and it ended up in my top 15, mainly because the reason why I kind of forgot about it was because there was a lot of other stuff I was kind of listening to at the time, and they're a mood band. Although I saw them live right around the same time. I can't remember if it was before this album had come out. I think it was before. I think it was when Opus Cities, they were touring for Opus Cities or whatever. But, yeah, and in some ways you might consider this the most accessible Sicketh record, which they're not that accessible. You got to be able to tolerate the wacky, extreme, Monty Python, Dr. Claw, theatrical vocals in the sort of concept of over to the writing. And you got to kind of be versed in, they have the crazy musicianship, which I always love. That's my favorite part of their sound. But, yeah, I unfairly, it sort of was an album I enjoyed, and it's better than all these records, so it ended up where it did that year in 2017. But it probably deserves more now, some 5+ years later. So, anyway, Sicketh, The Future in Whose Eyes, number 117. In fact, initially when I made this list, I didn't even have it on the list. I was like, how can I not include the last Sicketh record? Because Sicketh they're masters. They're just amazing when they're great. They just, I love, they're among extreme metal, they're at the top of my list, among my top, probably. If I'll do a ranking of extreme metal bands, just extreme metal bands, not just prog metal, they would be in the top 5, top 10, maybe not top 5 even. Anyway, Waking the Fallen, the second album, I think, from Avenged Sevenfold. I'm not sure. It might have been their debut, actually. All I know is I got into City of Evil and then listened to this album, Waking the Fallen, right after that, and I liked it. Yeah, no, they had a previous record called Sound in the Seventh Trumpet, which not rated very high, and I don't believe I ever even listened to the whole thing. But this album is better. It was a sort of a, you could call it a sophomore breakthrough or whatever. This album, concluded I actually came to enjoy this album more than City of Evil. And they have a few other records. One of them I think might be showing up on my list as well. But it's stylistically it's not that different. It's not quite as poppy, but it's still a fun, energetic record. And I know the people that like them or even our fringe fans, this is the one they lean toward. Waking the Fallen. It's like bat metal, it's like Halloween metal. Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't listened to this in a long time. Yeah, you got this I Won't See You Tonight, Part 1 and Part 2, So you have your prog, compositions, the longer, compositions and everything like that. I know that some of their later records, they seem to embrace prog more, but, to call them not sort of into writing long pieces with multiple parts would be wrong. It's like, well, they're not prog at all, and it's not actually even tagged as prog. So I guess maybe just because they're long songs doesn't make them prog. Some people would disagree with that, but that doesn't make any sense. Diana, was it the Giorgio Moroder produced album? Not Gloria Gaynor. Anyway, she's got like the 20-minute pieces. Is she prog? Well, not really. Just because you have a long piece doesn't mean it's prog. But I just would say that they were experimental or at least different enough that it's metalcore, melodic metalcore. I mean, that's probably the first and foremost genre they would fall under. They're metalcore with a lot of melody, or poppy metalcore. But there's more to that, again. And I thought, well, if there's the second record, this is a slightly more enjoyable record to listen to even than City of Evil. So, all right, number 115, Mastodon's Leviathan. I talked about Mastodon. I think I had a previous one in there. I think it was Hushed and Grim, the most recent one. When I first checked out Mastodon, this was sort of my favorite. I never got obsessed with Mastodon, but of course it's a concept album about Moby Dick. They have a lot of big riffs. It's got, the cover captures sort of the what they're trying to go for with this. I remember it was kind of like, is this really prog metal? Yeah, sludge metal. But it's weird with Mastodon. I want to always love them more. I thought with Hushed and Grim, even though it was a double album, I liked it a little bit more than I'd ever really liked a Mastodon album. But yeah, that being said, I never listened to it a ton. That's why I've never became a huge Mastodon fan. It probably would have been a fair amount higher. It's number 7 on this list. It's and they became sort of a hipster favorite too, which was not a good thing, or not a positive thing for me. Iron Tusk, I remember really that, and I Am Ahab. Those were the two that I probably remember. It's it's a lot of dense riffs. It's Mastodon, kind of doing their thing. People that know them, the Wall of Sound at points. But it's their second record. A lot of second records seem to be in favor with a lot of these extreme metal albums. So, and as extreme as some bands know, but it's heavy enough to just not call it standard prog metal, I guess you could say. But anyway, Mastodon, number 115, Leviathan from 2004. Hollow the Mountain King from Savatage. Now, is this prog metal? Not really. They would become more prog metal, but it's like a sort of a concept album, and Chris Oliva was just a fantastic guitarist, and this is by many accounts the sort of masterpiece in the Savatage work. It's the first album they worked with Paul O'Neill, which that was significant enough. It's sort of, they were one of the founders of sort of power metal, although you listen to something like Ed Guy or Rhapsody or something like that, and you listen to them, and they're a fair amount different. With a fast riffing, sort of major key, major scale use, just in the falsetto vocals. Savatage didn't really have a lot of that, a little bit, but they were just, they were kind of influenced by a lot of Deep Purple and some of the Nawab and stuff in the thrash scene, and they came up around the same time, a lot of those thrash bands. They were from Florida. But they kind of changed and broke through with this record. The title track is a fantastic piece. And I have it on vinyl. I probably, sadly, only listened to it a couple times. But, I've seen a lot of live recordings with the songs. I mean, I appreciate this record. It's almost like their version of Awaken the Guardian, which will show up on this list, not to be surprised. Where the fans and the critics and everything, even the bands and other musicians always kind of praise this record, like Awaken the Guardian, where I can understand it, but my taste doesn't really fall quite at that level with it. But to not put it on this list would be kind of silly. It still belongs on this list. Savatage are a band I love. I love many records, and spoiler again, we're going to see many Savatage albums on here. I think this is the second one. We had Streets before, so actually we had Streets and Gutter Belly, so this is the third one. I'm not keeping track. Maybe when I do these long lists, I need to come up with a spreadsheet or a list just on a piece of paper with it. Anyway, number 114, number 113, Farmer's Almanac from East of the Wall. This is weird because this album to me really was post-rock but post-metal, and it's pretty much all instrumental. But it is post-metal, and the other thing about East of the Wall is they're a band that I've liked many records from, two specific though. The other one that's going to be falling on this list, going to become most people that know them would be able to predict it, is quite a bit higher. But they also stylistically are slightly different because there's no core, because there's no vocals. It's not metalcore or hardcore. No, but look at this. This is back in 2008. It's instrumental prog, post metal. Long Distance Calling would be a fair comparison to their sound. They're not identical, but using sort of influences from post rock and progressive metal, math rock a bit too. So this I bought it on vinyl. It's a trip, this album. I mean, I don't have specific favorite tracks. I just think the whole record is 40 minutes of just perfect sort of instrumental musicianship with atmosphere and dynamics. So Farmer's Almanac from East of the Wall, number 2008, number 113. Sadly, I think my vinyl copy, at least the case, may be damaged. I need to get another copy. Have those up in those bins upstairs and everything, and the sunlight and moving it in there wasn't kind to it. Number 112, Persephone, Spiritual Migration. Persephone is an interesting band in that when I've gotten into them, I love them, but I don't go back to them that often. But it's progressive death metal of a kind. At times, really epic, really technical. They put out several other records. The previous one, Shinken, I liked a fair amount, but this to me was their peak, and I didn't include anything else on this list. Unfortunately, the spoiler again. The last couple records, I know a lot of people have caught on to them. I've kind of just struggled with them at points. They're okay. They have moments, but they're long records. And this is no exception. It's 70 minutes, but for whatever reason, Spiritual Migration, I felt like was like it was the second record. It was a jump up from Shinken. That was part of it, and it flowed better. I don't know. I mean, that's for lack of a better way to describe it. But they're crazy. Their musicianship is off the charts at times. I mean, it's like Brain Drill in a sense, in that it's like, are you really playing that many notes? Are you really playing that fast? It's like paradiddles at 64th note paradiddles and the guitar runs. So, where are they from? I think they're from, like, Andorra, or was that the name of one of the records? Yeah, they're from Andorra. So, but they played at, I want to say the Prog, Night of the Prog, or, I forget, one of those festivals. They may have even played at Prog Power, one of the Prog Power festivals. So they've crossed over more, which I'm really happy, but unfortunately my taste in some of their more recent music kind of pales in comparison to this record, and I'd even probably put Shinken above that, so if I do a redux, Shinken may show up. I'm not sure. I don't know. I should go back if I have the time, the desire, to go back to revisit their whole catalog. I may go back, but yeah, they're a band like some of these bands where they don't write short records, so that's part of their charm and their challenge of the issue. Anyway, number 112, number 111, Burst Origo. Now, this is the only, I think I've got a couple Burst records on this list. This is the first one. Their third record, but this is the first one they really started doing more proggy stuff. The atmosphere is great. I mean, the comparison to Mastodon is sort of half there, but I've always felt like, even though they're not identical to Mastodon, they're doing a similar kind of sludgy, progressive stuff that works a little better for me than Mastodon. I mean, Mastodon I like. Burst, when they're at their best, I love. And this album, I mean, it's a trip. it's a little more, raw. It has more of the hardcore elements than the follow up. Unfortunately, Burst, it's like then they ended up breaking up after the record after this. Then they've come back and they played at Prog Power, one of those Prog festivals, and I'm hoping they're reissuing some of their records. I'm hoping that they end up maybe doing some new music at some point, because I love them. They're from Sweden, like many bands, many metal bands especially, but many prog bands. But yeah, Origo from 2005, number 111. If I can go back here. All right, number 110. So we see Diablo Swing Orchestra. This is the top Diablo Swing Orchestra record on this list. Sing-along songs for the damned and delirious. And does it differ that much from their other records? No, but I kind of felt like when I heard this record, I became more of an official fan. I had listened to the first record and not liked it initially because I didn't like the opera vocals, but the opera vocals grew on me a little bit, and I'm not sure if they have that same singer. I know they've changed singers at points. They have a male and a female singer, but I just look at this. I just only play. They're kind of in that unexpected vein, but they're a little more toned down. I mean, they use the sort of swing jazz elements with the craziness and the musicianship, but this is like it's like circus music. It's circus rock, really. It's circus metal, but playful. They're combining many different genres, beyond swing and metal or metalcore, Vodka Inferno, and they got all these guests on this song, Siberian Love Affair. Well, that's just like a 58-second little interlude, but yeah, I mean, this is it. I mean, I kind of did, it's splitting hairs between some of the records, but I kind of felt like since this album was the first one I liked, I have more nostalgia for it, and they haven't really changed or even topped. I felt like they've made that like masterpiece record. Unfortunately, that's why this is their top record, and it's only at number 111 or whatever, number 110. So, but yeah, if you never listened to Diablo Swing Orchestra, it's a good place to start. Unless you really like opera vocals, I might go to the debut album. I think that was their second record. Yeah, The Butcher's Ballroom. But anyway, number 110. Number 109, okay, so we see Orphanland again, All Is One, another band like Persephone, who has yet to really release a short album. This is their most sort of symphonic record, if I'm not mistaken, from just listening to like their albums are long, they're epic, but they're also kind of meander at points. This album I felt like I went back to it after liking it and liked it a little more, but I never got attached to it. And this was in 2000, was it 17, 13? It was 4 years before that. But the other thing I think is this might be the first album without their guitarist, their original guitarist who left, Yossi. I can't remember. Yeah. No, he's on this, so it's the last one. I couldn't remember that, because I know he left, and that was a big deal to some people. But not that it's completely changed their sound or anything like that. But so yeah, I mean, it's the sort of biblical, oriental, folk metal, a lot growls, female vocals, But again, this particular record has more of a symphonic element. I think they used like an orchestra with some of the songs on this. So. But yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a record I probably should listen to more. But because of that, I don't put it quite as high as some of their others. But it's still a really good record, or still a good record. I would buy it on vinyl. I don't know. I should look here quickly. I would buy it on vinyl if I could find it for a reasonable price, for sure. Yeah, it did come out that same year, but who knows how much money where I could find it and everything. Anyway, Orphanland, All Is One. Number 108, Paradox from Royal Hunt. This is one of the better 90s prog metal. I mean, you could say there's some power metal in their sound, but DC Cooper, the vocalist, who the Dream Theater fan base knows him, he guest appeared on a Shadow Gallery album, but he kind of shines. That kind of highly influenced by Deep Purple, but this is I've never this album kind of grew on me more and more and more. I listened to it. It was on Magna Carta. It was released among other parts, and it's the best Royal Hunt record. In fact, I think it's the only Royal Hunt. They have another album I listened to called Moving Target, which I didn't like as much, and I haven't really kept up with them since, sadly. But River of Pain, The Awakening, they have a lot of good, really big choruses. The vocal layering in the tracks, it's like Queen. It's a lot of really big parts on this album. and I just kind of grew it more and more. I also have association with this with my jukebox CD player and falling asleep that this would be one of the albums that would come on and I'd hear parts of it. But yeah, it's catchy. I mean, it's a little cheesy. Some people might think so, the critics, but I think overall people have liked this over the years, and it doesn't really sound. I mean, does it sound dated? I don't think it sounds too dated. It still holds up, is more of what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, if you like 90s prog metal and don't know Royal Hunt's Paradox, you definitely need to check it out. So, DC Cooper is a really good singer. So, number 108, number 107, Meshuggah's Eye. So, I'm not a huge Meshuggah fan, but I kind of find, because this is an EP and the composition itself, that this is my go-to. And I even bought it on vinyl. It's intense, dense, extreme metal. They invented djent or whatever you would say that. They use a lot of polyrhythms, and it's crazy technical music. But I find that this album, it's the number one EP from 2004. This one just kind of flows really well, like a lot of tech death. And that's why I like it. When I initially got into extreme metal about 15 years ago, I was checking out a lot of bands I'd never really wanted to check out. And I think I enjoyed some of the other records. I know I checked out Obzen, and I kind of struggled with it. And, but Nothing. What's the other one? Destroy, Erase, and Proof. All those records, I wanted to like them more. It was such mood music, and this one worked because it was only 20 minutes. And I just think it flowed really well. So, anyway, Meshuggah's number 107. Number 106, Dead Winter Dead. So we have Savatage again. One of the 90s dead concept albums that Savatage did. Of course, this sort of introduced the world to their rendition of what's Carol of the Bells, which is Sarajevo 1928. Christmas music. Why does it says Sarajevo? It's Sarajevo. That was 1920. Oh, Christmas Eve, not 1920. Christmas Eve, Sarajevo, 1224. But, when I first was introduced and suggested to Savatage, a guy I was writing through the Metalhead directory on Metal Edge was just raving about this. He didn't know Fate's Warning, so I was telling him about Fate's Warning. And he was telling me the story of Savatage and what happened with Chris Oliva. But he was saying their new album, Dead Winter Dead, is just amazing. It's a very sad rock opera, but if you've never heard it, you'd probably like it. And while I'll say that they have other albums I like more, This is still an impressive concept album. I want to still get it on vinyl. It's recently issued on vinyl, like some of the other records. This Isn't What We Meant is probably the song I think of. Mozart and Madness. I mean, there's a lot of classical elements, and of course, it has the Christmas Eve Sarajevo that everyone's heard a million times. But there's other moments that you enjoy. Sort of the concept is this bombing that was happening in Croatia, it is, or whatever. And in these cities and stuff, and then there's this guy who's playing his violin or his cello or whatever outside, and then the whole thing with the gargoyle's weeping, and so yeah, it's in the wintertime, so it came out in 95. But anyway, of course, it's the third album with Zach Stevens on vocals, which I prefer. John Oliva, respect him as a vocalist, but I think Zach I like more as a singer. Anyway, number 106, Savatage, Dead Winter Dead. And we're looking at, how long? 28 minutes. Well, we'll try to get through at least to the top, to number 100. Evergrey, so an early 2000s prog metal album, In Search of Truth. Evergrey is one of those bands that is massive among Prog Power USA communities. They're somewhat big and they're popular in the metal communities. I'll fully admit that I enjoyed this album. I enjoyed seeing them the first time I saw them at Prog Power USA. The second, third, I saw them at least 3, maybe 4 times. Met Tom Englund and some of the other members. I remember James Bickers was talking, and really them, and they're from Sweden, I think, and Pain and Salvation are sort of what to look for in prog metal, not every band that sounds exactly like Dream Theater. But this was the album, and I'll kind of say that there aren't any other Evergrey records on this list. This is the album that I got into most. There's a song on here that reminds me of a Soundscape song, and I played the two back-to-back once on the radio, which is interesting. I can't remember which one it is. It's Rulers of the Mind, maybe? Or maybe Dark Waters. I know it's sort of a melancholy track, or sort of dynamic of moods. But there's a lot of great kind of atmospheric, fast riffs on this. There's a, kind of a thrash influence at points, but it's still proggy. I mean, it's not exactly like sort of progressive thrash, you could say. But I mean, Thomas England's voice is very distinct, very gruff, very rough. Maybe he was a fan of like Dream Theater's Awake or something like that. But In Search of Truth, for whatever reason, worked the best, and I would go back to it frequently. Like I said, I played some of it on the radio. The thing I was trying to not discount is the fact I never really followed up with listening to their catalog. I did listen to Recreation Day, I know, but they have several other albums. They're still an active band, although I'm not sure if the lineup has changed a little bit. But I think Thomas England's the singer in another band now. That's part of it. So they're let's see, he's with Redemption now. He took over basically for Ray Alder, so that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, they have, look at this catalog. They have like whatever it is, 10 other albums I haven't listened to. Recreation Day is the one that came out after that, and but this is actually still considered their best record, which is I find interesting. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was sort of changing tastes more, and my interest in sort of listening to prog metal. And I kind of just like, I've listened to prog metal. I want to listen to some other stuff, and so that's why they kind of fell victim to that. It's not obviously anything they did poorly. They put out many other records, and at least in due time, if not soon, I should probably try to spend time with some of them. Anyway, Shadow Gallery, another traditional prog metal album, Room 5 from Shadow Gallery from 2005. The final album with Mike Baker, which they've only put out one record since without him. He passed away, unfortunately. Really way too young. I think of this album for one piece, and it was the bonus, like the deluxe, whatever, the special edition, which has the with Mark Zonder and some other people, the Floydian Memories, unbelievably amazing, like well thought out, well crafted Pink Floyd epic medley. But the proper record, you don't really put that with it. It's a concept album, like. I think this was considered the follow-up or the second part of Tyranny. And, I mean, I remember in 2005, a lot of people were just, among Dream Theater fans on Mike Portnoy's forum, were really obsessed with this record, and I like a lot of it. The Andromeda Strain, that one, the interval pattern in that, and the sort of segue is just great. It's terrific. It builds up really well. But the Archer of Ben Salem. I know it's very conceptual. There's some intervals in here, so it's sort of a mood record. But they did that with Tyranny also. I don't know if they quite pull it off as much, but it's splitting hairs. Of course, I was talking to Prog Corner on his modern prog bands list. A lot of this is just splitting hairs. Is all we're doing here on making lists, and it's a great record. I mean, I think Shadow Gallery has a very consistent catalog, and just so happens some other records actually that are going to be higher. But Room 5, it'd be a good place to start if you've never heard Shadow Gallery for sure. Especially because you do have Mike Baker, of course, too. So number 104, number 103, the language, not the language, but from the Contortionist. I'm talking about Gent a little while ago with Textures, and the Contortionists came out, and their debut album was very gentish. And of course, I think it's the singer, Michael something. Maybe it's not the singer. I forget the guy's name that I knew because Michael Lassard. I saw him at other shows or something. He traveled and saw some bands, but he's very social, and he's very on social media. So I kind of when this album came out, I was like, oh, that's that guy that I seen at the show's band. And I know they're this wasn't as genty, it's listed as a genre, but they removed most of the gent, and that's why this album really worked, because I just don't need much gent, if any. But the prog metal, totally works. I remember that there's an echoing sort of process vocal part that I never can get out of my head. In fact, I think I mentioned that in. I think I mentioned that on the actual blog when I went over that back in 2014, was it? Yeah. I'm not thinking of Clairvoyant, the second album. I'm thinking there's a part that's repeated over and I can't get it out of my head. It's a line, it's a phrase. But shoot. I remember, and a lot of people were just obsessed with this record for a while, and I think it lived up. Yeah, Pat Metheny. See, I'm wearing the Pat Metheny shirt today. It came out in 2005. So they're comparing this. It came out in 2014. Well, I hear a lot of metal bands that actually reference Pat Metheny. It's weird. Or that band, Jolly, actually, among others. Anyway, I think I actually mentioned it because I think I had their record, one of the records in my list. But, yeah, I mean, I forget what the actual phrase is. You know, I'm not talking about clairvoyant. Yeah, they use some processed vocals, which I think works. It's a little bit like Cynic in that sense. So, but yeah, Language from the Contortionist. The Clairvoyant is a good record. I felt like this is better, though. And so the Clairvoyant didn't make my list. This is my favorite album from the Contortionist, or 103. Or 102, Avoid the Light. This was on the Progressive Art Rock list. It sort of crosses over heaviness and style. So, yeah, I mean, I talked about that on that list. It was pretty damn high, but it still belongs on this list because it does get heavy. It says post-metal. You know, it's metal enough. I mean, the riffs are heavy. They have several other albums which are probably even more metal, but this is their masterpiece. It still remains. It was their second album. This is a German band. They have a little bit. They have a guest singer. I think it's on The Nearing Grave, but they even have a quote from the Outer Limits in the sleeve, which I really appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah. Look at all the. I just talked about all this, you know. Dreamy, trippy, energetic rhythm, you know. I mean, you know, it's compared to many albums on this list, it's not as metal at all. That I wouldn't deny that, but it still fits within that sort of umbrella, and it's probably my favorite sort of post-metal or progressive post-metal album. Well, I guess it's not my favorite, but it's right up there. It's in the top 5 for sure under post-metal. So, for 101, we have Ocean Machine's Biomech. This is all screwed up, of course. This is really an album called Ocean Machine by what was known as Biomech, I think, but it's basically Devin Townsend's solo debut album or first debut album. So, Rate Your Music has this kind of screwed up. I probably need an update for that, but anyway, I like the song Life and the atmosphere, and I think Devin Townsend on this record, for whatever reason, isn't over the top, and so he doesn't sound like he's constipated. Just, you know, it works. It flows really well. I love the song Earth Day, which is on the next album, Teria, but which is my favorite Devin Townsend song probably at this point. But no, I mean, I can't deny that this is, a lot of people love this record. In fact, my good friend Josh Runquist from Heavy Debris Fiends recently did a ranking or a comparison of all on that site. What's the name of it? I forget what it is. Where you take all the records and where you put, and he put this number 1 now. He for ages it was all about Teria. Teria is the greatest record ever made, and somehow something's happened where this is sort of, you know, usurped it and become number 1. So yeah, it's the title track. I think is a title track. He mentions the title in it. In fact, you know, I almost wonder if Mike Vennard and the guys in Oceanside actually were fans of this record, because I kind of associate a little bit with that sort of wall of sound riffs. Like, specifically, I would say, yeah, it would be the second Oceanside record, Everyone's Position, anyway. But, yeah, Devin Townsend's, you call it Ocean Machine, call it Biomech. I don't know why it's called Biomech. Number 101. So we're looking at, I think I'm going to call it a day since it's 5 o'clock here in Minnesota, and that we're looking at 38 minutes. So try to resume this probably next week, you know, given I have the opportunity to do this. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time.